Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Welcome to our monthly meeting of the Heritage Committee, and I'll call the meeting to order. Do we have any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, can I have an approval of the agenda? Yes, Your Worship.
Madam Chair, can I just add an item? It's just about it's in regard to Heritage Bylaw. It's just an overview, just trying to get some information on it.
Certainly, Your
It
Worship.
could fall under new business.
Okay. Okay,
Thank you.
welcome. Anybody else? Okay, so moved by, okay, moved and seconded. And I'm going by memory with this. And so approval of the minutes that were. Okay, moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Beck. Okay. Okay, moving forward on our one item, and I believe Shallon is here to present. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, Todd is going to give us a little bit of background first on the agenda item. So over to you, Todd.
So 275 Kent Street is owned by the province but operated by Holland College as part of their Prince of Wales campus. It's on the north side of Kent Street between Weymouth and Cumberland and is across the street from the main Prince of Wales. It's part of a mature and established neighborhood. Properties fronting on Kent Street are zoned institutional, with most of them being owned and operated as part of the college, and the remainder of the block is downtown neighborhood. Building forms through the whole block are typically residential in scale and style and are a mix of single detached and multi-unit converted dwellings. This property is a designated heritage resource and is located in the 500 lot area. The area contains a number of designated properties that are shown in red, and that includes the nearby King Square. The building at 275 Kent dates to 1847, which is pre-Confederation. The 1878 panoramic view shows the full development of the block, which is generally still intact. These images on that view are actually usually really historically accurate, and in this one you see that the two front bays are not there at the time. The 1917 insurance plan happens to show those two bays on the front, and it reinforces the pattern of primarily wooden structures with deep backyards and tight side yards, fronting directly on the street faces on all four sides of the block. The current property lines show little change other than some center block development. So this is an application to amend a portion of the property which is designated by adding a thin strip on the east side of the property that would add about 38 square meters.
Sorry, Todd.
Yep.
Which way is east?
It would be this side. This is the property here. This is the east side. So it would add a thin strip along the edge, really through the backyard, and you'll see on a map in a minute, through that side. They're proposing to renovate and repair the original building, to replace the addition at the rear, and to renew the front entry ramp and stairs. So the building is a 2.5-story wood frame building with a street-facing side gable roof with a central gable and built in a classical revival style. Features include wood shingle cladding, heavy corner boards, window trims, and a central Palladian window. The building is in scale with the neighboring properties and has a street setback consistent with the remainder of the block. Uses of the rear yards on the block vary. Some are open yard space, and some provide parking, and some have sizable structures. 1974 photo of the building shows an enclosed front porch and a second-story sunroom, which are now removed. The applicant's proposing to undertake restoration work on the exterior of the original portion of the building. This will include repairing damaged or deteriorating wood trim, especially at windows, skirt boards, corner boards, and trims, as well as replacing the existing windows. A ramp that was installed in 2011 is proposed to be removed. And a new walk steps ramp are proposed to be installed to meet current code requirements and also reinforce the building symmetry. So this portion in green is the piece of property that would be amended with 275 Kent Street. It's on the east side. The boundary lines to be adjusted in favor of 275 Kent Street. The existing setback is not permitted under the current regulations, and a variance is being requested that goes through the planning department to do that. The adjustment to the property line would add about 38 square meters. Oh, sorry, I should also say, the existing addition on the back, there's a two-story addition on the back of the building that will be removed and rebuilt in a longer piece, or a much larger addition added on here. So the existing addition, well, how would I say, the proposed addition maintains the same width as the existing addition, but it would move from about 22 feet in depth to 55 feet in depth. The current piece on the back is 2 stories in height, and it's basically lacking a great deal of architectural interest. The proposed addition, as seen from the rear in this image, is substantially larger. It's a full 3 stories in height. The height falls just below the peak of the roof of the original building, which helps mask it from Kent Street. It is, however, likely to be visible from surrounding properties on the block, as well as from King Square and from Weymouth Street. So in this image, if it were to come basically about where the dormer is, it would continue through that depth. That would be the west elevation. So the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada states that any new work should be physically and visibly compatible with, subordinate to, and distinguishable from the historic place. The proposed addition extends substantially deeper into the backyard, is 3 stories in height versus the 2 stories of the existing addition, and is larger in mass. The addition is sizable, and in fact, the footprint alone is larger than the original portion of the building. Although this building was constructed as a single-family residence, it now functions within the institutional zone. And as such, the addition located at the rear of the original house and lacking ornamentation in an institutional context really doesn't compromise the appearance of the house from Kent Street. The architectural style and detailing of the proposed addition are clearly distinguishable from the original. The main box has a flat roof versus gables of the original building. These yellow pieces are, you can see they're quite thin, plied walls, and which have a peaked roof or a peaked top on them and a change in siding in a horizontal fashion. Windows on the new addition appear similar in size, are fixed but are punched and lacking any trim. Materials for the addition are required to be non-combustible. So the siding proposed is metal cladding, but it varies from the main box having vertically oriented cladding to horizontal on the yellow pieces, I guess. So it does make some gestures towards the historic building by acknowledging some of the character defining elements such as the gable roof form, window sizes and proportions, as well as siding orientation. Given this is an addition to a heritage structure and not simply a new building in the heritage area, the use of historic elements in a new manner allows a degree of compatibility while still being distinguishable. And given that this property is a designated heritage resource and the proposal is also subject to the design review process, it's one of the few instances where Heritage Board will not make a final determination on the proposal, but rather makes a recommendation to council for final determination. So any comments or commentary on the addition would move forward through the design review process prior to going to council as well. So staff is generally supportive of the request to replace the rear addition, and we would recommend that, Heritage Board recommend that council would approve it. We can get Shallon to speak to that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shallon with 9 Yards, and I can try to answer any questions. I'm actually not the lead architect on this, but I think I'm aware of everything that has gone on, so I can try to answer. One thing I just wanted to say about the new addition, we are on a very limited site. As you can see, we're very close to the adjacent building. So that really did limit sort of material palette, number of windows that we're allowed to have and things like that. So this was, the design was sort of an effort to minimize the mass of that 3-story building and to try to bring it down to more the scale of the neighborhood. So that was sort of those more gable-shaped, sort of orange wood look pieces that are on, but they also have to be metal. So it's just going to be sort of a darker metal is the mass that would sort of disappear behind these brighter gable-shaped masses that will be some kind of wood look metal. So that's sort of the concept. And I can answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for either Todd or for
Madam
Shallon?
Chair, I just have a question to either Todd or Alex. I thought the process was that if it's passed by this board, recommended to council, council supports it, then it goes to design review, and design review doesn't have to come back to council. Is that right, Alex?
This application is somewhat unique. I think it's likely, is it the only one that we've had to deal with in this manner? It's both a designated property and it has to go through the design review. So I think what Todd is asking is that in this case, this is the start of the process. It is a designated property. It will be ultimately council's decision, but she's seeking your input before it goes on to design review, and then eventually will end up at council. But this one is unique because designated also needs a design review.
Just to clarify, so if we recommend it to council, it goes to the next public meeting, or maybe tonight, correct?
It will be, there won't be a public meeting on it, but you will, what Todd is looking for today is to get your, sense of where you want to go with the application, and if you're comfortable with it, then it will go on to design review, and then we will package up the application, send it to council with both commentary from this board and the design review board.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the design review, it's a flexible bylaw. My heavens, it's applies to different parts of the city, whether it's 500 lots in south or outside of the 500 lots, and now I have another variance to it. And this is the first time we had this type of variance?
Well, yeah, it's usually, the design review committee is very different. They have a different lens than this board. This board looks at heritage buildings. Typically, you're renovating a heritage building. In this case, you have a heritage building, but you're dealing with a fairly extensive addition to the building that clearly fits into the design review side of the sort of the ledger. It's a brand new building. It's a product of its own time. They're much more comfortable looking at that addition now. But the key thing is it is a designated property. And so Todd is trying to seek from the board today, if you're comfortable with this proceeding and then heading on to council. So if the board has a concern about it, then it doesn't even proceed on to the design review board.
Okay, no, Madam Chair, I support the project because I think, again, this is developing heritage properties in the 500 lots. Just getting back from Quebec last week, Old Quebec uses a lot of different materials for their old buildings, their heritage buildings in the Oakville and Bosville, so we're not breaking new ground here. So I'm supportive. It's just that the process, like, let's say design review gets to design review and they don't like it. Then what do we do?
I'm fairly, we have a good group of architects on the design review board as well. So, I think that they'll look at it in the context of it's just the blending of the two buildings. So, if this body is comfortable, we'll get it off to the design review board as quickly as possible, seek their input. And for the most part, the design review board, they typically don't. There might be a couple of examples where they've asked for things, but most cases on the design review board, they support the recommendation that's coming through. So, I mean, they add to the process. This is designers talking to other designers, which it was intended to do. I'm not a design professional, so the design review board allows the applicant's designer, which in this case is 9 Yards, to have a good conversation with some other architects who are on the design review board, and it usually results in a stronger product. I don't remember an application going forward where the product wasn't improved as a result of the design process, and that's what it's intended to do.
Your worship, was your question answered?
It was. It's just, again, I find the design review process a little bit difficult to understand because we use it in so many different applications. I know when it was originally brought forward to council, it was to deal with heritage properties south of the 500 lots, south of Houston Street. But now I'm finding we're using it for different parts of the city and in different ways. So, no, but I support the project. And it's good that Aaron Stafford is sitting in this group with us because he's also on the design review board.
I
Thank you.
just had a question for clarity. If design review is not usually a process that ends up on the council floor, why wouldn't it go to, if this committee recommends that it is, go forward to council, why wouldn't it go forward to council first and be approved? Because that's the only part that council has to approve, and then it come back and do its business of the design review, because that doesn't go to council. I just want to make sure we're following a process correctly.
Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of if you go the way that you're proposing, it's almost as if the decision is made. If it goes on to council and council approves it, it's pretty well, the design review board is, they've gotten the pretty clear direction that the council is okay with the project. So it's just that's exactly why Aaron is on this board. They're purposely, one of the appointees that's on both the design review board and the heritage board was appointed to be that sort of liaison between these two issues, right? You're dealing with a very modern building attached to a very historic building. You folks will make a comment. It's a designated property, 100% your domain. You have to give some indication whether you're comfortable with that. If you are, then it will go on to the design review board, and they will ensure that that blending of the two styles is done in a manner that's supported, and then it'll go on to council.
Okay, and just before Councillor Beck, just seeking that clarity around, then eventually when and if it goes to council, what is council deciding on? Are they deciding on the design review recommendations, or are they deciding on the heritage? Like, we're getting into some gray area, are we not? Or maybe I'm just not clear today.
No, it is a designated property. It's primarily the purview of this board. So it'll come through that, the design recommendation that whatever you do today or not, but, it'll be a recommendation from the design review board that you support the project, and it has been reviewed by the design review board, and therefore, it will be recommended for approval by council, if that's the direction it goes. I mean, I'm not sure which way it's going to go.
Yeah, sorry. Again, pardon my newness and my ignorance on this, but I'm kind of I'm a little confused still myself. So we say it's a great idea, and then it goes to council to say push them forward. Okay, goes to design review, and then design review says yay or nay. If they say yay, they send it to council to be approved on at that time. Am I correct?
Yeah, you're correct, but just, it's this board that's got really the teeth on this application.
Right.
The design review board is just going to tweak it. That's what the design review
Part
board in
two.
its earnest, that's what it does generally, is just tweak applications, so when it gets there, that it's fully supported, it's been through all of the processes. A lot of times, some people struggle when you add a new structure of this size to an older structure. And there is design principles that architects are aware of to marry the two. So this one is unique. We haven't dealt with it before, but that's what you would do. But this board, I would recommend that you're very comfortable with whatever recommendation you make today, because that is the primary recommendation that's going to be going to council. It'll go to the design review board, but they typically just tweak the application
Yeah.
and work with the other designers to say that would improve it. And then by the time it gets to council, the whole project is approved in its totality. And again, if there's any questions by your colleagues as to why this new building is attached to an old building the way that it is, it's been fully reviewed and hopefully well supported.
Right. Just one thing. I like the project. I like the concept behind it and everything. And again, I just don't know about how these marrying of the old and the new works, because they are very distinct buildings. And I know Todd mentioned that it's designed to be clearly distinctive. It seems to me such a stark contrast between the fronting on Kent Street and what's in behind it. Is that a common thing in these sorts of projects? Again, I'm just trying to understand a little bit in terms of how that would work. Yeah.
To Councillor Beck, yes, you're absolutely right. The public generally think that an addition to a heritage building should look exactly like the heritage building. The problem with it is it breaks a whole number of design principles, which I'm not a designer, and that's why the Heritage Board makes that transition. There's many projects, which I won't name, in the city, which I think did a good job of blending the two, but sometimes the public struggles with that because they think an old building should always look like an old building.
Right.
And there's a flag on the field. If you're a
Right.
designer, even a heritage person, they don't like when a building is designed and it tricks your eye and you think that the building was always the way that it was because it all looks the same. And therefore, that they would prefer that this transition be made the way that they're proposing.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. And I'm just wanting clarification too, Alex. So because this is a unique application, we did get into a situation with design review where it could have gone that they weren't going to support and recommend something to move ahead. But does it die at that committee level, or does it not come to council anyway? Like, does council not have that final say? And if they don't, shouldn't they?
That there is, on that application that you're speaking of, if staff supported it and the design review board recommended against it, it will go to council to arbitrate it. That hasn't happened yet, but that, for that exact reason, that would have ended up at council to make a decision.
Okay, so we would have seen that application even if we had gotten to a standstill that day.
If the design review board had have really, took a firm position on that, which was counter to the staff position, the bylaw is set up that then, in that case, it goes on to council to make the final decision. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Can I ask Shailene a couple of questions about the project, if you don't mind? And this is where I'll try to keep to the heritage component of it, but I'm trying to understand. Is it required to connect at the third floor level? So it's a large addition of the project, which I'll say doesn't, come up to it and have a minor connection to it. The whole mass of the building kind of piggybacks onto the heritage structure. I mean, I think that from Kent Street, I get it, there's almost no view of the building. You'll hardly ever see it. But I think the view from Weymouth Street, I think you will see it and probably see it quite a bit more than the existing structure that's there. So that's kind of, I think, one question is, do you need to make that third floor connection, or can you connect at the second floor and maybe disconnect the addition a little bit visually? And then metal siding, I guess, is it exposed fastener? Do you know yet? There are other non-combustible materials there. So I'll kind of put that out there. Maybe I'll stop there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess to the first question, I totally know what you're getting at with the disconnection of the third floor. I also tried to pitch that to the client, and just functionally, it didn't work for what their needs were to connect those two floors. So that's why it ended up not being that. And we did try to, like, that's what I was saying about the dark material. Like, that was sort of an effort to sort of minimize what you're seeing behind those things, so the connection doesn't jump out at you. So yeah, it was more a functional decision than aesthetics. Material-wise, we haven't picked the exact metals, honestly, but we were looking at a sheet-style metal for the background and then a hidden fastener metal for the front. There's quite a few products that would match that now.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I don't know, I don't think any material is going to make it disappear.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not
no,
going to make
for
it
sure.
disappear, but I think it's going to be tough to make it recede. So I don't know that I would share the same opinion as some of the other members here, that the application of two different materials and a kind of faux gable form applied to the side of the building, I'd almost rather embrace the box and spend the money on detailing that box, maybe, to kind of, if you think about the quality of heritage buildings and what we like about them, I think, is the detail, the richness, the scale, the materiality of them, and perhaps maybe the money's better spent on adding that to the box rather than putting facades on the side of it. But that's a personal opinion, so.
Madam Chair, again, just to clarify, when I said I support the project, but one of my questions was to be about the materials. And I think the materials should match the materials that are on the building that are facing onto Kent Street. That, whether it's shingle or whatever, I think it is a shingle material, that wooden material would be the same that would extend on the new addition. The concept, Aaron, I agree to, but in terms of the material, like it should be wooden windows. Like, I'm going through the heritage bylaw. If it's a heritage resource, and if you add to that heritage resource, it has to be, wooden structures and so forth. So I'm advocating or pushing that we do extend the materials that exist on the existing building on Kent Street.
Unfortunately, it can't because of the National Building Code. So its relationship to the property lines, it has to be a non-combustible material. So it has to be either stone or brick or metal or cement board or something of that. In fact, they're probably so close to the property line, it's probably non-combustible wall construction behind that as well. So it can't just be wood frame construction. It would have to be masonry or steel stud construction as well, because it's so close to the property line.
And not hardy board?
Yeah, we could.
Could potentially be hardy board.
Yeah, which is a non-combustible.
It is.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
warranty issues with some of that product
Right.
now, and that also influenced some of our decisions.
But Madam, that's where I'm going with this, is that if hardy board is a non-combustible material for 25 years or 50 years, that's what I'm advocating. Thank you.
Go ahead, Alex. I know you had a comment.
Aaron answered the question dealing with the non-combustible, so it has to be a non-combustible product. So that question has been answered. Thank you.
So just so we're all clear, we are deciding today we're not deciding on the design of the building. We are deciding on exactly what.
You're deciding whether the Heritage Board feels the addition, the bulk, the massing, the size, the location, and the materials to a certain degree, but you are somewhat delegating that to another body to look at that, but you're trying to determine if you think this is the appropriate thing to do on that designated property.
And are we still, did we already do this at planning board for the variance, or is that still to be done as well?
That would have to be done as well.
Okay,
Yep.
so really, once we do all this, it's still going back to planning board for the variance, which hasn't even been decided on yet, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
Mercy, okay, thank you.
So, Madam Chair, the Heritage Board or the non-combustible material can be part of the design review discussion that we have, correct? We're not making a decision that it's going to be metal siding, it's going to be brick. That will come up under the design review, and that's, I'm sure Aaron will have some comments, hopefully. Thank
That's
you.
my understanding, yes.
So
Thank
Todd,
you. Yeah,
so
go
Todd,
ahead.
can I ask you a question? So then what, because I think in previous, so I want to be clear too. I'm supportive of the project. I understand it's a tight site, that it's restrictive in terms of the materials you can use. It seems like a almost too much program, given the constraints of the site, but that's, I understand, part of the desire of the client. I mean, obviously, they have a program of what they want to achieve, so I'm kind of sympathetic to those needs. I think that the renovation or the restoration to the facade, the main portion of the building, seems appropriate. The ramp is actually an improvement. There's lots of good things about the existing building. And so I want to be clear about that. I think the real question is, it's a big box in the backyard, and how do you make that most appropriate use of that? And it's a tough one, to be honest with you. So I guess my question, the question was, at the heritage level, we have commented on materiality before. We do question about how massing suits an existing building, if it was an addition or, this just happens to be a really big addition. So I do think we can talk about materiality from the Heritage Board perspective.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, you can make your commentary, because this is the board, this is where in this case, because it is a designated property, this is where the teeth is. So you can recommend, if you want, that when it goes on to the design review board, you can recommend, what you would like to see as a part of that next phase of the review. Thank you.
I think any comments that this board would make, we would pass on to the design review board. And assuming that staff felt that your comments were listened to and you would be okay, there's always the option to bring it back, which we would try to avoid doing. But the more comments and the more thoughts that we can share with the design review board, probably the closer things can get to enhancing the historic part of the building as well.
Madam Chair, I know the area because I grew up in that area, and I know some of the neighbors, and I think material will be a sensitive issue, Shailen. It will be. Like a metal siding on a historic building. Is it that date back to what did you say it dates back to? I know our homestead dates back to, our homestead dates back to 1842. 1847? Yeah. Yeah, so everybody knows it's a heritage building.
Okay, so anybody else have any other comments? Hello, Councillor Duran. That's all right. You're more than welcome to join us. So I guess we need a motion, if no one else has anything else, whether or not to agree with the Heritage staff recommendation. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, I think if you're prepared to do that, that one of your recommendations, you could see if it's supported, is that the Heritage Board recommend that the project be approved and forwarded to the Design Review Board for comment prior to going to council.
I'm not a heritage design reviewer or a design reviewer, but I do think that Aaron and you guys have some good ideas around, I do believe, maintaining our heritage buildings as much as we can. And I I don't know if this is where you do it now, our recommendations, or if that's something Todd can maybe take through email. I don't think what we saw would look heritage to me. So I think there definitely needs to be some further work to keep it looking heritage.
that. I know this is going back to the next board, but I do want to go back to what Alex and Todd said earlier, is that when we're building something new of this time and we're attaching to a heritage building, I believe that it is not the right thing to do to try to make it look the same. That's, there's things to do to complement it, but I don't think trying to make it match is the right solution from a design perspective. So I just want to put that in the notes.
And if I could just put in the notes too, that Hardie board, a non-combustible material, would provide that consistency or at least similar like. And Hardie board is new material. It's not material that you would find back in the 1842. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, committee members, what's next? Do we have a? Okay, so moved by His Worship to take staff's recommendation and move on to design review with eventuality going back to council for final decision, but it still needs to go to planning board as well for the variance. Okay, moved by His Worship. Do we have a seconder? Moved by Councillor Beck, and all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor, 5 in favor. Opposed? And 1 opposed. Okay.
Who's opposed?
Your seatmate, yeah. Okay, so His Worship had one item added to the agenda under new business.
Yeah,
that is
and I
the
know we don't have
heritage
much
bylaw.
time, Madam Chair, but looking through the heritage bylaw, I know that we have some heritage resources properties that require some tender love and care. I can speak about the Houston Street Irving that is a heritage. It's in the heritage property register. Is that correct?
It's listed in the National Register as well as
Yeah.
being a municipally designated.
And it's actually survived some horrendous, disastrous storms, and I think as a board, as a city government, a municipal government, do we have any tools in the bylaw that can provide some guidance to the owners of some of these properties to at least shore them up, to at least give them a longer life until the renovation or restoration will be undertaken? Todd?
Perhaps not in the bylaw, but there's certainly appropriate ways to mothball historic properties, to shore them up and keep them safe while before they're being renovated.
So could we look at a couple of properties, like I'm referring to the Houston Street Irving as one that we could send something to the owners to say that, looking at the state of the building, that continual catastrophic weather events can affect the long-term or the longevity of this building? Is that something we can do? Can we send a notice to them, just to ask it?
Your Worship, if I hear you correctly, are you thinking that maybe the heritage staff could identify, make a list of more than just the one, like identify what ones do need to be, I think Todd called it mothballed? Great term, by the way.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
We were looking for a list of properties that we should mothball?
No, I'm not saying mothball. What I'm saying, again, the term what I'm looking at is that we have one property, maybe a couple of properties in the city of Charlottetown, that if they continue to be ignored structurally, that eventually something will happen and that they'll be forced to take them down. I know something like that happened in St. John, New Brunswick. So is it under this heritage assessment, are we able to send a notification to the owners that your structure requires some loving, tender loving care.
I think you'll have to leave that one with us, and I will seek an opinion from Mr. Hooley. I wouldn't want to be sending any letters that, because Mr. Hooley would eventually have to, depending on how the respondents, got back to us. So I will look into that, and I'll report back. Thank you.
And just lastly, it is we do have a heritage assessment report, references to it. I know it's about either granting a heritage designation or delisting a property. So I think I'm looking at something that guarantees that we can look at this property, hopefully save it until it's restored or renovated. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Anything else before I call for your final resolution to a motion to adjourn? Unless there's something else? Motion to adjourn? Moved by His Worship, seconded by Councillor Beck. All those in favor? Great. Have a good evening, folks.